You're probably wondering how this all started and how it spiraled so far out of control. It begins with a call, an urgent welfare check. The kind of routine request that no one expects to lead to something sinister. But for Detective James Thompson and his team, this would be a case unlike any they'd encountered before. On the surface, it looked like any other routine investigation, a concerned neighbor reporting strange noises from the house next door, a house that had been quiet for months. But as soon as they arrived, they knew something was wrong. There was an eerie stillness in the air, a sense of something lurking just beyond their reach. They knocked, waited, then forced their way in. What they found inside would haunt them forever. The house was disturbingly clean. Too clean. Everything in its place, down to the smallest detail. It was as if the occupants had gone to great lengths to cover up what had happened there. But that wasn't what caught their attention. No, it was the smell. That foul, unmistakable odor that would make anyone's stomach churn. At first, they couldn't place it. Then it hit them. It was death. The smell of something far worse than just a missing person or a simple crime. Something much darker was at play here. Inside, they discovered the unimaginable. The body of a woman, carefully hidden in plain sight, wrapped in what appeared to be household items, as if someone had tried to conceal the evidence but left enough clues for the team to follow. But there was more, much more. Among the scattered belongings, they found documents, photographs, and personal effects that didn't belong to the woman, but to someone else entirely. And that's when the investigation took a horrifying turn. Who was this woman? Why was she killed? And more importantly, who was the real killer hiding in plain sight? As Detective Thompson dug deeper, he began to unravel a disturbing pattern, a pattern that pointed back to the family at the center of it all. A family that, on the outside, appeared as normal as any other. But as he uncovered the layers of deceit and manipulation, he realized that there was no such thing as a normal family in this case. Every corner of their lives was shrouded in mystery, and the more he uncovered, the darker it became. The ties that bound them together were far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. But what really shocked Thompson wasn't just the family's involvement. It was the fact that they weren't acting alone. There was someone else pulling the strings. Someone far more powerful, more dangerous, and far more calculating than anyone realized. And this person was willing to go to extreme lengths to keep their secrets buried. As the investigation spirals into a tangled web of lies and betrayal, Detective Thompson begins to realize that there's a far bigger story here, one that reaches beyond a simple murder, one that touches on the very fabric of society itself. But who can be trusted? And what will it take to uncover the truth? You're about to find out. This isn't just a crime story. This is about trust. This is about loyalty. And most of all, this is about how far people will go to protect the things they value most. In the next few minutes, you're going to see how Detective Thompson and his team, driven to their breaking point, piece together a puzzle so complex and disturbing that it might make you question everything you thought you knew about justice. You're going to see a crime so cold, so calculated, that it will make you wonder, how could this happen right under our noses? By the time you reach the end of the story, you'll have more questions than answers. You'll feel the weight of every twist, every betrayal, and every horrifying revelation as the pieces come together in a way that will leave you breathless. But here's the catch. You won't get all the answers until you stay with me until the very end. The journey ahead is filled with shocking revelations, emotional depth, and a mystery that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't go anywhere, because what happens next will change the way you think about crime forever. Stick with me, and we'll uncover the truth behind this twisted case together. As the investigation continued, Detective Thompson began to realize that every lead he followed only seemed to open up more questions, each one more perplexing than the last. At first glance, the family at the center of it all appeared to be as normal as they come. Neighbors, friends, even coworkers all spoke highly of them. There was nothing about the household that screamed danger. In fact, they had all the outward appearances of a middle-class family living a peaceful, happy life. But appearances, as he quickly learned, were deceiving. Behind closed doors, There were secrets buried so deeply that even the closest friends and family members had no idea what was truly going on. The family consisted of two parents, a husband and wife in their early 40s, and two children, an older son, 17, and a younger daughter, 12. On the surface, they seemed like any other American family. The husband, Greg, was a well-liked local businessman who ran a small but successful landscaping company. The wife, Laura, had been a stay-at-home mom for most of the kids' lives, often volunteering at the local school and community center. Their children, while quiet, were well-behaved and never seemed to draw attention to themselves. It was a picture-perfect family in a neighborhood where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. But Detective Thompson knew better than anyone that perfection was often the first sign of something hiding beneath the surface. His first step was to dig into Greg's background. He had the kind of reputation that would make anyone believe he was just a hard-working, devoted father. But Thompson had seen this kind of facade before, the kind that hides something darker, something more twisted than anyone could imagine. As he started talking to people who knew Greg, the cracks in his public persona began to show. Greg had been involved in some shady dealings in the past, nothing that would have raised red flags at first, but just enough to make Thompson curious. A few people mentioned that he had a quick temper, particularly when it came to his business. There were rumors of threats, of deals gone wrong, and even whispers of intimidation tactics he might have used to secure contracts. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make Thompson wonder if Greg's perfect life had been built on something much more sinister. Laura, Greg's wife, proved just as complicated. On the surface, she was the quintessential suburban mother, devoted to her children, involved in the community, and always with a warm smile for anyone who passed by. But when Thompson spoke to those who had known her for years, a different side of her began to emerge. Laura had been struggling with mental health issues, something she had kept hidden from almost everyone. Those closest to her had noticed the signs, the subtle shifts in her behavior, the occasional outbursts, the periods of deep depression, and her erratic mood swings. It was clear that, while she put on a perfect show for the outside world, she was struggling beneath the surface. And yet, no one ever imagined that those struggles could lead to something as horrific as what had happened in their home. The children, too, raised questions. The older son, Jake, was an angsty teenager, quiet, reserved, and often distant. The neighborhood had its own share of strange occurrences, things that, at first glance, might seem like nothing more than coincidences. There were strange visitors to the house, people who were never seen again after a few brief encounters. Neighbors spoke of strange noises coming from the house late at night, things that didn't seem to make sense. One neighbor, an elderly woman who had lived next door for decades, mentioned that she had once seen Greg's truck leave the house in the middle of the night with a large, wrapped object in the back. She never thought much of it at the time, but after everything that had happened, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a late-night errand. With every new piece of evidence, Detective Thompson felt the weight of the case growing heavy, but her behavior had been erratic lately. A few days before the discovery of the body, she had been spotted acting strangely, speaking to herself and muttering about things that didn't make sense. When questioned, she clammed up and became increasingly withdrawn. Detective Thompson couldn't help but wonder if the family's dark secrets had somehow infected the children as well, if they were more involved in this twisted case than anyone could have imagined. But as Thompson dug deeper, he realized that the family wasn't the only one with secrets. He had been known to skip school on occasion and had a few run-ins with the law in the past for minor infractions. But nothing that seemed to suggest he was capable of something as violent as what was unfolding. His younger sister, Emily, was much more outgoing. He had followed the trail of clues through the labyrinth of lies and deceit, but it always seemed to lead to another dead end, another unanswered question. Every new lead uncovered another layer of complexity that made the case even more confusing. Just when he thought he had a suspect in his sights, something would happen to make him doubt it. An alibi that checked out, a piece of evidence that didn't match, or a new witness who came forward with a completely different story. The deeper he dug, the more the pieces seemed to scatter, leaving him with a puzzle that was too disjointed to put together. But perhaps the most unsettling part of all was the growing sense that someone, Maybe even someone inside the family was manipulating the investigation from within. Detective Thompson began to receive anonymous tips, each one more cryptic than the last. A message scrawled on a piece of paper left in his office late one night read simply, "You're looking in the wrong place." Another tip came through an encrypted email, the subject line reading, "They know you're close. Watch your back." Was someone trying to throw him off the scent, or were they genuinely trying to help him? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that no one was as innocent as they seemed. Everyone had something to hide, something to protect. As the investigation reached its boiling point, Detective Thompson found himself standing at a crossroads. Every instinct told him that the truth was within his grasp, but it was slipping through his fingers, as though someone was carefully pulling the strings from the shadows. With each new piece of the puzzle, the case grew darker, the stakes higher. And in the end, he had to ask himself, was the truth really worth uncovering, or was some darkness better left in the past? One thing was certain. This case was far from over, and the twists that lay ahead would be enough to make even the most seasoned detective question everything they thought they knew. Now, with so many possibilities and so much at stake, Thompson knew he had to keep going, because the truth, no matter how horrific, was just around the corner. As Detective Thompson's investigation progressed, the pressure began to mount. Every new discovery, every revelation, seemed to come with a new set of obstacles that were slowly wearing him down. It wasn't just the weight of the case that was beginning to take its toll. It was the fact that it seemed like someone, or something, was deliberately trying to thwart his every move. What had started as a routine welfare check was now spiraling into a labyrinth of confusion, betrayal, and suspicion, and Thompson could feel the walls closing in on him. It began with the disappearance of a key piece of evidence, one that could have confirmed the link between the family and the victim in a way that would have shifted the entire investigation. Thompson had obtained a set of security camera footage from a neighbor's house, footage that showed a dark figure leaving the family's home on the night of the murder. It was the break he'd been waiting for, the one piece that could tie everything together. He was moments away from viewing the footage when it mysteriously vanished from the precinct's evidence locker. Someone had erased it. A routine investigation into the security system showed no signs of tampering, yet it was as if the footage had simply evaporated into thin air. Frustration simmered beneath Thompson's calm exterior. Who would go to such lengths to sabotage the case?
And why?
It felt as though someone was watching his every move, anticipating his next step, and making sure he was always one step behind. The missing footage was only the beginning of a series of strange events that left Thompson questioning everything and everyone he had trusted up until that point. In the days that followed, things began to take an even darker turn. Detective Thompson started receiving anonymous messages, written in cryptic, almost poetic language, warning him to stop digging. One message, slipped under his office door late one evening, simply read, "Some truths are better left buried. Digging deeper will cost you more than you can afford." Another came through an encrypted phone call, the voice distorted but unmistakably urgent. The message was clear. "You're too close. The truth will ruin you." Was it a threat from the killer, trying to intimidate him into backing off? Or was it someone from within the force, someone who didn't want the case to go public for reasons of their own? The fact that these messages kept appearing at the exact moment he was on the verge of a breakthrough made Thompson more paranoid with each passing day. To make matters worse, a new player entered the scene. Sarah, a journalist who had been following the case from the beginning, had taken an interest in the investigation. At first, Thompson saw her as a potential ally, someone who could help shed light on the case and bring attention to the troubling details that had been uncovered. But as they spent more time together, Thompson began to notice inconsistencies in her behavior. Sarah seemed to know too much about the investigation, as if she had access to information she shouldn't have. The more Thompson observed her, the more he realized that there was something off about her. Her questions often seemed designed to lead him down certain paths, as if she had her own agenda, one that wasn't aligned with his search for the truth. She was an expert at drawing out details, at coaxing him into revealing his next move, all while maintaining an air of innocence. Could she be playing both sides, gathering information for someone else? Or was she genuinely trying to help? Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something important, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to determine whether she was an ally or an adversary. The local business partners who had worked with Greg all had conflicting stories about his character, each one revealing just enough to make Thompson question everything. Was Greg really the trustworthy businessman everyone thought he was? Or had he been hiding a more sinister side, a side that no one had ever seen before? And then, just when it seemed like Thompson was on the verge of a breakthrough, an even more disturbing revelation surfaced. A former employee of Greg's landscaping company came forward with a shocking confession. The man, who had been fired under mysterious circumstances years earlier, claimed to have witnessed something on the night of the murder, something that could turn the entire case on its head. But just as Thompson was about to meet him, the man disappeared, vanished without a trace. No one had seen him leave, and there were no signs of a struggle. It was as if he had simply slipped out of existence, leaving no clues behind. Thompson was left with a haunting question. Was this man really about to reveal the key to solving the case, or had he been silenced by someone who didn't want the truth to come out? As the pieces of the puzzle scattered, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that someone very powerful, was orchestrating events behind the scenes, pulling the strings and making sure that certain truths stayed hidden. The deeper he went, the more he realized that the case was connected to something far bigger and more dangerous than he had ever anticipated. And just when he thought he might be getting closer to the truth, another door slammed shut in his face, leaving him with more unanswered questions than ever before. The clock was ticking. The pressure was mounting. And Thompson knew, deep down, that if he didn't uncover the truth soon, there would be consequences far beyond what he could have ever imagined. But as the investigation spiraled further into darkness, he began to question whether he was chasing the right lead, or if he had already become part of the twisted game that someone else was playing. Was someone on the inside feeding her information? Or worse, was she hiding a secret that tied her to the case in ways that Thompson couldn't even imagine? The more he tried to dig into the family's past, the more the pieces seemed to slip through his fingers. Every person he interviewed seemed to have something new to hide. The neighbors, once friendly and open, now grew defensive when asked about the family, but the obstacles didn't stop there. Thompson's personal life, which had already been strained by the demands of the case, was beginning to unravel as well. His partner, Detective Lisa Navarro, had started acting distant, her demeanor shifting in subtle ways that Thompson couldn't ignore. She had been with him every step of the way, but recently, it felt like there was a wall between them that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just the case weighing on her, it was something more personal, and Thompson could sense it. There were moments when he'd catch her looking at him strangely, as if she were holding something back. When he tried to confront her, she would brush it off with a half-hearted excuse or a change of subject, but the tension was palpable. Had she been compromised? You said. As Detective Thompson's frustration grew, so did the eerie sense of isolation that had begun to envelop him. Each lead he followed seemed to circle back in on itself, only to unravel further with each new twist. But just when it seemed like the case couldn't possibly get any more complicated, a secondary thread of the mystery emerged, one that threatened to shake Thompson's world to its core and cast doubt on everything he thought he knew. It all started when Detective Lisa Navarro, his trusted partner, received a message late one night while they were reviewing case files in the precinct. At first, Thompson thought it was just another of the cryptic warnings that had been plaguing him for weeks. But when Navarro hesitated before showing it to him, his gut instinct told him that something wasn't right. The message wasn't just a vague threat this time. It was a direct warning to her, one that seemed specifically designed to get under her skin. The text, which was as chilling as it was cryptic, read, "You're closer than you realize. Stop while you still can." At the bottom of the message was a single photograph, a grainy image of Navarro standing in the parking lot just outside their precinct, snapped from what appeared to be a nearby alley. It was taken only a few hours earlier. Someone had been watching her. Navarro's usual composure faltered for a brief moment, her face draining of color as she stared at the phone screen. For a split second, Thompson saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen before: fear. She quickly dismissed it, brushing the message off as a coincidence, but Thompson could tell that it had shaken her. He could feel the tension building between them as the weight of the situation settled in. Was this a mere coincidence, or was Navarro somehow caught in the same web of deceit and danger that Thompson was struggling to navigate? The more Thompson thought about it, the more he realized that there were too many loose ends. The timing of the warning couldn't have been coincidental. Navarro had been getting closer to unraveling the family's darkest secrets, but this message seemed to suggest that someone knew exactly how close she was. Was it a tactic to scare them off, or was it something more sinister? The idea that someone could be targeting them both, not just Thompson, but Navarro too, made everything feel more personal, more dangerous than ever before. The next morning, as they sat together in the interrogation room, a new piece of evidence surfaced, one that completely contradicted everything they had believed up until that point. For weeks, they had been operating under the assumption that the family at the center of the investigation was entirely innocent, caught in the web of a larger conspiracy that had yet to be uncovered. But as Thompson reviewed the results of a recent search of the family's home, a shocking discovery came to light. A hidden compartment in the father's study, overlooked during previous searches, had been uncovered. Inside, they found a stack of old documents, each one marked with dates and locations that seemed to indicate a pattern of suspicious financial transactions. At first glance, it appeared that Greg, the father, had been involved in something much darker than anyone had suspected: a vast network of money laundering and fraud. The discoveries sent shockwaves through the investigation, completely turning their understanding of the case upside down. What was even more disturbing, however, was the fact that these documents had been purposefully hidden. They were not just casually misplaced but carefully concealed, as if someone wanted them to remain buried for as long as possible. The documents pointed to international connections, names of individuals that Thompson had never heard of, and locations that seemed to stretch far beyond the confines of the small town they had been investigating. How far did Greg's involvement in this secretive world really go? And more importantly, why hadn't anyone mentioned this before? Was it possible that Greg had been hiding this part of his life for years, pretending to be the unsuspecting family man while secretly orchestrating illegal operations under the radar? The connection between Sarah and this man was more than just a passing acquaintance. It seemed deeper, more intimate. The way Sarah spoke to him, the way she interacted with him, suggested that there was far more to her role in this investigation than Thompson had initially thought. Was Sarah working for this man? Had she been planted into the case to steer the investigation in a direction that would protect certain individuals from exposure? Thompson could feel the suspicion rising within him, but there was no concrete evidence to prove it. All he had were gut feelings, and in a case like this, that wasn't enough. As if the discovery of the documents wasn't enough to rattle Thompson's nerves, something else came to light that raised even more questions. One of the key figures from Greg's past, a former business associate, had suddenly reappeared in town. The man, who had left under mysterious circumstances years ago, had kept a low profile until now. He was spotted meeting with Sarah, the journalist who had been hovering around the investigation. As Thompson pushed deeper into the investigation, the risks seemed to multiply. Every new lead brought with it more uncertainty, and the list of potential suspects continued to grow longer. No one could be trusted. Not the family, not the journalist, not even his own partner, who seemed to be hiding something he couldn't quite figure out. Every time Thompson thought he had a grip on the truth, something new would emerge that threatened to pull it all out of his hands. Was this all part of a master plan to bury the truth? Or was he just chasing ghosts, running in circles without realizing that the answers were right in front of him? But then, just when it seemed like the case couldn't get any more twisted, a chilling phone call came through. Thompson answered it to hear nothing but heavy breathing on the other end. Then, in a low, almost sinister tone, the voice whispered, "You're running out of time, detective. The truth is buried under layers you're not prepared to dig through. And once you uncover it, you won't be able to handle what comes next." The line went dead, leaving Thompson to sit in the silence, heart pounding in his chest. Who had called him? Was it a warning from the killer, Or was it someone trying to control the flow of information, manipulating him like a puppet? What did they know that he didn't? And more importantly, what was about to unfold that would turn the entire investigation on its head? With every passing moment, the tension mounted and the stakes grew higher. Thompson could feel the walls closing in, and he knew that the answers he so desperately sought were locked away in a dark, dangerous place, one that he wasn't sure he was prepared to enter. The deeper he went, the more it became clear. The real truth might not just be something he could live with. The tension had been building for days, but it wasn't until that fateful evening that Detective Thompson truly realized just how deep he was entangled in something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. It started with the feeling, the persistent, nagging sense that someone was watching him. It wasn't the kind of vague suspicion that could be brushed off. It was something that gnawed at his insides, creeping into his thoughts like a shadow that never quite left. The feeling became impossible to ignore after he'd noticed the same dark sedan parked on the street outside his house several nights in a row. Each time he glanced out the window, the car was there, motionless, its windows tinted enough to keep its occupants hidden. At first, Thompson told himself it was just coincidence, perhaps a neighbor or someone else with business in the area. But as the days passed, his unease grew, and a pit started to form in his stomach. Something wasn't right. And then, one evening, the car was gone. Thompson had convinced himself it was nothing more than his imagination, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that whoever had been watching him hadn't just disappeared. They were waiting for the right moment to strike. The next morning, things took a drastic turn. Thompson was just finishing up a routine check of his files when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but he answered anyway, hoping it was news that could push the investigation forward. The voice on the other end was low, distorted, almost mechanical, deliberately altering its tone as if to hide its true identity. "You're getting too close," the voice hissed. "If you don't stop now, you'll regret it. We'll make sure of that." The line clicked dead before Thompson could say a word. His heart skipped a beat as the weight of the warning sank in. Who was it? Was it someone from the case? Had one of the suspects gotten wind of his investigation and decided to intimidate him into backing off? Or worse, was it someone closer to him, using fear as a tool to control him? The thought made his blood run cold, but it wasn't the first time he'd received threats. What truly unsettled him was the unmistakable certainty in the voice. It was a warning, and it wasn't vague. It felt personal. As the day wore on, the paranoia crept back in. Thompson tried to push it aside, but it lingered in his mind like a thick fog, clouding his judgment and making him question every decision he'd made so far. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became that this wasn't just about the investigation. This was something much bigger, something that stretched beyond the confines of his career, perhaps even beyond the law. The investigation had become a game, and he was no longer sure of the rules. Were the people he'd been working with all along truly on his side? Or had they been playing him from the beginning? That evening, as Thompson sat at his desk, his phone buzzed again. He checked the message with growing trepidation. It was from an unknown number, the text short and chilling. "She's gone. Don't bother looking for her. She's part of it now." Thompson's heart dropped into his stomach. The message was a threat, but it wasn't just a warning to him. It was a declaration. The she in the message could only be one person, Lisa Navarro, his partner, the one person he had trusted above all others. He immediately dialed her number, but the call went straight to voicemail. His mind raced with all the possibilities. Had something happened to her? Was she in danger? The thought that someone he had trusted was now in harm's way, possibly even complicit in the dark dealings they had been investigating, was almost too much to process. His mind kept flashing back to the odd interactions between Navarro and Sarah, the journalist who had been involved in the case. Could it be that Navarro had been playing a game of her own, feeding information to people behind the scenes? Was she working against him? Or worse, was she somehow involved in the conspiracy that had ensnared them all? The more he tried to make sense of it, the more the pieces seemed to fit together in a way that made him question everything. Unable to sit still any longer, Thompson rushed to Navarro's apartment, the sense of dread intensifying with each step. When he arrived, the door was slightly ajar, the faint sound of a television playing softly inside. He called her name, but there was no response. His heart pounded in his chest as he stepped inside, every instinct screaming at him to be careful, to expect the worst. The apartment was eerily silent, the dim light from the TV casting long shadows on the walls. Thompson's eyes scanned the room, landing on the coffee table, where he noticed something unusual, a small, crumpled piece of paper, as if it had been hastily discarded. He picked it up, his hands trembling as he unfolded it. Written in shaky handwriting, the note read, "Trust no one. They're all watching you. You're not as close as you think." The words sent a chill down his spine. It was as if someone had been inside her apartment, leaving a message just for him, a message meant to undermine everything he thought he knew about the investigation. Could Navarro have been the one to write it? Had she left a clue for him, or was this yet another warning? The possibility that his own partner might be playing both sides made his blood run cold, and the sinking feeling in his chest only deepened when he realized Navarro's phone was missing. She hadn't just disappeared, she had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only cryptic messages and a mounting sense of dread that something much darker was unfolding. Thompson stood there, staring at the note in his hand, struggling to make sense of the chaos that was unfolding around him. His mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle slipping further out of reach with every passing second. Was Navarro still alive? Was she in danger? Or had she been taken? Was she a part of something more dangerous than he had ever imagined? As his thoughts spiraled, he realized just how far gone the situation had become. This wasn't just about solving a case anymore, it was about survival. And the further he dug into the mystery, the more he realized that the forces working against him were far more powerful and dangerous than he could have ever prepared for. As the night stretched on, Thompson found himself questioning his every move. Who could he trust now? The more he thought about it, the more he began to feel the walls closing in. He was no longer just a detective on a case. He was a man on the edge, caught in a web of lies and manipulation that seemed to have no end. And just when he thought he had no more room to fall, a final, gut-wrenching thought crossed his mind. What if he wasn't meant to uncover the truth at all? What if the truth was something that no one could survive knowing? The urgency of the situation hit him like a cold slap to the face. He had to find Navarro, had to find the answers, but would he even make it out alive? You said. Just when Detective Thompson thought he had seen every possible angle of this twisted case, the ground beneath him shifted with an earth-shattering revelation. It came at the most unexpected moment, when he was on the verge of breaking down completely, drowning in a sea of confusion and paranoia. It all started with a phone call from an anonymous tipster. The voice was distorted, deliberately masking its identity, but there was something about the message that made Thompson's stomach twist in a way he couldn't ignore. You've been looking in the wrong places. You think you're chasing ghosts, but you've been ignoring the most obvious truth, the voice said cryptically before hanging up. At first, Thompson brushed it off, dismissing it as another desperate attempt to throw him off the scent, but the more he thought about it, the more the words gnawed at him. What was he missing? What had he overlooked? He went back to his notes, retracing his steps in the case, desperately searching for a clue that would bring him closer to the truth. Then, in a moment of sheer frustration, he decided to revisit an old lead, an individual who had once seemed unimportant, almost peripheral to the case. It was Sarah, the journalist who had been investigating the same case from a different angle. She had been there at the beginning, but after a few brief encounters, Thompson had dismissed her as just another bystander caught up in the chaos. But now, with the pieces of the puzzle scattered and nothing making sense anymore, he couldn't help but wonder if he had misjudged her. What if she knew something he didn't? What if she had seen something crucial, something that had been staring them all in the face from the beginning? Thompson found Sarah at a coffee shop, her usual spot, typing away at her laptop like she had all the time in the world. He sat down across from her, his gaze steady and intense. She looked up at him with a faint smile, but there was an air of caution in her eyes, as if she had been expecting this moment. Without preamble, Thompson asked, "Sarah, what aren't you telling me? I need to know everything you know." For a long moment, She didn't say anything, her fingers hovering over her laptop's keyboard, as though trying to find the right words. Finally, she closed the lid with a deliberate click, her eyes locking with his. "You've been looking in the wrong direction, detective," she said softly, her voice betraying no emotion. "This whole case, it's not what you think. You've been chasing shadows. The truth is right in front of you, but you've been blind to it." Thompson's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? You're not making sense." Sarah leaned in, lowering her voice. "It's not the people you think are behind this. It's not the suspects you've been chasing. It's someone much closer to you. Someone you trust." Her words struck Thompson like a blow to the chest. He stared at her, his mind racing to make sense of what she was saying.
Who? Who are you talking about?
She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "You've been investigating Navarro, right? Your partner? She's not who you think she is. She's been playing you this entire time." Thompson felt a surge of disbelief, but Sarah's eyes were unwavering, her expression grim. "Navarro was always one step ahead of you. She's been orchestrating this whole thing, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. All the time you thought you were investigating her, she was the one watching you. And now, she's gone, she's in too deep." The words hit Thompson like a hammer, his mind struggling to keep up with the enormity of what Sarah was saying. Navarro? His partner? The one person he had trusted implicitly, who had been by his side through every lead, every dangerous turn, was the mastermind behind it all? His thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and anger. "You're lying," he said, his voice cracking with disbelief. "She's not, she can't be. I've seen the evidence. I've talked to her. She's just as trapped as I am. She's..." Sarah cut him off, her voice low but firm. "You don't get it, do you, Thompson? She's been playing you, from the start. Every lead you followed, every suspect you questioned, it was all part of her plan. She manipulated you into thinking you were in control when in reality, she's been the one pulling the strings. The question you should be asking is not where she is, but why she's gone. What's she really up to? What's her endgame?" Thompson's head was spinning. Everything he had believed, every assumption, every piece of the puzzle he thought was falling into place, was now called into question. If Sarah was right, then everything he had done had been for nothing. Navarro had been playing him, using him to cover her tracks, to lead him down a path where he was blind to the true objective.
But why?
What did she want? What was she hiding? Before Thompson could ask another question, Sarah stood up abruptly, as if she could sense his growing unease. "I'm not here to fix your mess, detective," she said, her voice hardening. "You have to figure this out on your own. But mark my words, Navarro isn't gone. She's out there, and she's got one hell of a plan. You need to find her before it's too late." With that, she turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving Thompson in stunned silence. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. He was no longer just a detective chasing a case. He was a man standing on the precipice of a truth so dark, so twisted, that it threatened to pull him under. The realization hit him like a freight train. He had been a pawn in a game he didn't even understand, played by the very person he had trusted most. Now, more than ever, he had to find Navarro, had to uncover the secrets she was hiding, before everything he knew came crashing down around him. But as he left the cafe, a cold shiver ran down his spine. A nagging thought lingered in his mind, one that made his blood run cold. What if Sarah wasn't telling him everything? What if she had an agenda of her own? The deeper he went, the more the lines between ally and enemy blurred, and Thompson had to ask himself, could anyone be trusted in this twisted game? "You said." The walls were closing in. Detective Thompson could feel it with every step he took, like the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths bearing down on him. After his conversation with Sarah, his mind had spun into chaos, every rational thought fraying at the edges. The idea that Navarro, his partner, his confidant, was playing him, manipulating him into chasing ghosts, had shattered everything he thought he knew. The trust he'd placed in her, the countless hours they'd spent side by side unraveling case after case, now felt like a cruel joke. But there was more to it. There had to be. Nothing made sense. If Navarro had orchestrated this entire investigation, if she had been the mastermind behind the lies, the dead ends, and the misdirection, why had she kept him so close? Why had she allowed him to get this far if she knew all along? Was it to use him? Or something worse, something more insidious? With his heart racing, Thompson returned to his office, barely aware of the passage of time. His phone buzzed with a text from his ex-wife, Mary, reminding him about their son's school play that evening. He stared at the screen, the message a jarring contrast to the nightmare swirling in his head. The reminder of normal life, of the things that once mattered, felt like a cruel mockery. His thoughts were fractured. There was no escape from the pull of the case. The guilt, the growing sense that everything he had believed was now a lie, overwhelmed him. And yet, there was something he couldn't shake. Something in Sarah's words gnawed at him. What if she was right? What if Navarro's involvement went even deeper than he could imagine? Before he could think further, the door to his office creaked open. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. Navarro's presence filled the room, like it always did. She had this way of walking in without a sound, a quiet force that always seemed just a little too controlled, too precise. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, her eyes scanning the room, lingering for a moment on the piles of case files scattered across his desk. She knew what he had been working on. She had seen it all before, every piece of evidence, every suspect. But something was different now. Thompson could feel the tension hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. He wasn't going to let this go. He couldn't. He stood up, his voice steady, but his heart racing. "Navarro, we need to talk." She didn't respond immediately, her gaze flickering with something. Was it fear? Or was it something else? Maybe it was guilt. Whatever it was fleeting. She gave a soft smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What's on your mind, Thompson?" He met her gaze, the weight of everything he had uncovered pressing down on him. He could feel the walls closing in around him, the tension suffocating every word. This wasn't just about the case anymore. It wasn't just about solving a mystery. This was personal. This was about betrayal. "Sarah told me something," he said slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "She told me you've been lying to me from the start. That you've been pulling the strings this whole time. That you've been manipulating me." Navarro's expression didn't change. She stood there, unflinching, as if the accusation didn't even faze her. Her calmness only heightened his suspicions. He could feel the anger rising in his chest, but he held it in check, determined not to lose control. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Have you been lying to me this entire time?" For a moment, there was silence. Then Navarro finally spoke, her voice cold, like steel wrapped in velvet. "You're getting too close to something, Thompson," she said. "Something you don't want to understand." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He stared at her, trying to process what she meant, but before he could say anything, Navarro moved closer. Her presence, once reassuring, now felt suffocating, like a shadow closing in around him. She leaned in, her lips brushing his ear as she whispered, "You're not going to like the truth, detective. But it's too late now. The choice is yours. You can walk away and forget everything, forget what you've learned, forget what I've told you. Or you can keep going and end up just like them." Thompson's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, he was paralyzed. Them?
Who was she talking about?
The people who had disappeared? The ones who had fallen victim to whatever twisted game she was playing? The threat in her words was unmistakable, but it was the cold finality in her voice that left him reeling. He had no choice but to ask, "What do you mean by that?"
Who are you talking about?
Navarro took a step back, her expression unreadable. "I'm not the one you need to be afraid of, Thompson. The truth is much bigger than you think. You're tangled in something that's been brewing for a long time, and if you dig too deep, you won't just lose your career. You'll lose everything." She hesitated for a moment, then added, "Your son, Mary, they'll all be at risk. Is it worth it, Thompson? Is finding the truth really worth losing everything you love?" The words hung in the air, and for the first time in his life, Thompson felt the heavy weight of the decision that lay before him. Should he push forward, knowing that his family could be in danger? Could he sacrifice everything he held dear just to uncover a truth that might destroy him? Or was Navarro's warning enough to pull him back from the edge, to walk away from the case before it consumed him entirely? His mind raced with thoughts of his son, his ex-wife, the people he loved. If Navarro was right, they could all be at risk. Was the truth really worth it? But just as quickly as the thought entered his mind, another one followed, a sharp reminder of everything he had already lost. The victims. The innocent lives caught in the crossfire of whatever game Navarro and her mysterious partners were playing. He couldn't let it go. But the fear that gripped him, the fear that his family, his very life, could be destroyed by the very people he had trusted, was almost too much to bear. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves, but the decision before him felt impossible. Every instinct pulled him to run, to protect those he loved, but his sense of duty, his desire for justice, pulled him in the opposite direction. The stakes had never been higher. The tension was unbearable, and Navarro's eyes never left him, the silent warning clear. She had already made her choice, and now it was his turn. The seconds ticked by, and Thompson realized that no matter what he decided, there was no going back. And Navarro was right about one thing. It was too late to back out now. But the path forward would lead him into the darkest corners of a conspiracy he couldn't yet fathom, and every step closer to the truth would cost him more than he was willing to pay. The air felt thicker now, as though the very atmosphere was conspiring against him. Thompson had always prided himself on his ability to read people, to trust his gut when something didn't feel right, but right now, his instincts screamed louder than they ever had before, and yet, he was no closer to the truth. Navarro's words, chilling as they were, began to twist in his mind, like a knot that only tightened the more he tried to unravel it. The idea that she had been manipulating him, using him to get closer to the heart of something far darker than he had ever anticipated, was horrifying. But what terrified him more was the possibility that Navarro wasn't even the biggest player in this game. If anything, she was just a piece of the puzzle, a piece that was now trying to warn him, to keep him from discovering the full extent of what was at stake. As the hours passed, Thompson couldn't shake the sense of being watched, of being pulled deeper into a web that he was helpless to escape. His phone buzzed again, but this time, it wasn't a message from Mary or a reminder about his son's play. It was a cryptic text, one that made his blood run cold. "You're not the only one asking questions, detective. If you're not careful, you'll become the next target." There was no name, no signature, just a threat. The urgency in the words made his heart pound in his chest, and for the first time, the full weight of the situation hit him. This wasn't just about solving a case. It wasn't even just about protecting his family. It was about survival. But just as quickly as the fear settled in, a new realization began to form. The case wasn't just about the people who had disappeared.
It was bigger than that.
Much bigger. The threads he'd been following were connected to a network, one that reached far beyond his department, beyond Navarro, and beyond anything he had ever imagined. The conspiracy wasn't just local, it had tentacles in every corner, people in positions of power, people who were watching every move he made, waiting for him to slip up. And they were already making their move. He had barely processed this when the phone rang. His heart skipped as he recognized the name on the caller ID.
Sarah.
But something in the way she said his name, her voice trembling, sent a chill down his spine. "Thompson, they know. They're coming for me." His blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Who is coming for you?" he demanded, panic creeping into his voice. I don't know. I thought I was safe. I thought you'd help me, but I've been wrong about everything."
I found something."
"Something that proves it all. They're monitoring me. I just got a call, and they warned me to stay quiet. To stay out of this." Thompson felt his pulse spike. "Sarah, where are you? We need to get you out of there." But Sarah didn't respond. Instead, all he heard was the faint sound of a door opening in the background, a rustle of movement. Then, the unmistakable sound of a loud crash. The phone line went dead. His heart stopped. There was no time. No time to process what had just happened, no time to think. He didn't even know if Sarah was alive. He couldn't waste a second. The stakes had escalated beyond anything he could have imagined. The people behind this were willing to go to any length to keep their secrets buried, and they were willing to kill anyone who got too close.
But it was worse than that.
The more Thompson thought about it, the more he realized that Navarro had been right. He was no longer just a pawn in their game.
He was the target now.
And if he didn't act fast, it wouldn't just be Sarah at risk. It would be his son, Mary, everyone he loved. They would all be in danger. And yet, he had no idea who to trust anymore. Everything he had built, everything he had worked for, was unraveling before him. Even Navarro's warning didn't feel like enough anymore. The realization hit him like a gut punch. She had been a part of this all along. She had known more than she let on. This wasn't about loyalty or about the law. This was about power. And the more Thompson dug, the more he uncovered, the more he realized that no one was truly innocent in this mess. In a daze, he grabbed his jacket, slamming the door behind him as he rushed out of the office. Every step felt like it might be his last. His mind raced, each thought more frantic than the last. Who had been playing him? Who was really behind the strings that were pulling everyone in this web? Was it someone close to him, someone who had been hiding in plain sight all along? Or was it someone he would never have suspected in a million years? The car ride to Sarah's last known location felt like an eternity. He couldn't focus, couldn't breathe. The streets blurred as the adrenaline kicked in, drowning out everything except for the nagging feeling that he was already too late. Every instinct told him he wasn't going to find Sarah alive. The phone call, the sudden silence, it all pointed to one thing. Whoever was behind this had already covered their tracks. But that didn't stop him from driving faster, pushing himself, his car, to the limit. And then, just as he neared the building, his phone buzzed once more. But this time it wasn't Sarah. It was a message from an unknown number. "You're too late. She's gone." His stomach dropped. Everything he had been working for, every thread he had pulled at, was slipping through his fingers. It wasn't just a case anymore. It wasn't just about answers. It was about survival. And he was running out of time. The air felt suffocating, thick with tension, as Thompson stepped into the dimly lit warehouse, the one place that had haunted his mind for days. He had tracked every lead, followed every breadcrumb, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to face. The truth, the one he had been clawing at, was finally within his reach, but the question that gnawed at him was whether he was ready for it. He had chased it blindly, driven by the need to uncover the darkness, but now, standing at the threshold of this final confrontation, he wondered if it had all been a trap, if he had been lured here for one last piece of the puzzle, one last chance to close the door on everything he had learned, only to be swallowed by it. The silence of the warehouse was deafening. Every step Thompson took seemed to echo off the cold concrete walls, reminding him that he was alone, completely exposed. His breath came in shallow gasps, a mixture of fear and anticipation. He had prepared for this moment, or at least he thought he had. But now, with the weight of everything on his shoulders, the significance of what he might find hit him with a force he couldn't shake. The phone calls, the messages, the cryptic warnings, they all led here. It was all connected, a network of lies and secrets that had spiraled out of control. But the true villain, the one orchestrating everything from the shadows, had yet to reveal themselves. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he suddenly felt the presence of someone behind him. He spun around, his instincts kicking in, but no one was there. His breath hitched in his chest, his heart pounding in his ears. He wasn't alone. He hadn't been alone for a long time. The realization hit him hard. He had been followed, watched, manipulated from the very beginning. Whoever was behind this had always been one step ahead, and Thompson had been too blind to see it. And then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. His phone buzzed again, pulling him out of his thoughts. The screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. "You're too late. She's gone. There's nothing left to save." His heart sank, and for a moment, he was paralyzed by the weight of the words. It felt like everything was slipping through his fingers, like the last remnants of hope were being ripped away from him. But then, as he read the message over and over, something clicked. The words were too certain, too final. Whoever sent this knew something. Something Thompson had missed. And they were taunting him with it. He crept forward, the creak of the old floorboards beneath his feet sending a shiver up his spine. His eyes scanned the dark corners, searching for any movement, any sign of life. There was no one in sight, but Thompson knew better than to let his guard down. It was Navarro. But she wasn't the same person he had once known. The woman before him was colder, harder, her face etched with something that didn't belong, something sinister. Her eyes, once warm and filled with empathy, now seemed to pierce through him, calculating, unreadable. She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the concrete floor like a slow, deliberate drumbeat. The tension in the room thickened, and Thompson's pulse raced. "You thought you had it all figured out, didn't you?" Navarro's voice was low, almost mocking, but there was something in it that sent a chill down his spine. "You were so sure that you were the hero in the story, but you never even saw me coming." Thompson took a step back, his mind racing. "What are you talking about, Navarro? This has gone too far. You've been playing me the whole time, haven't you?" Her lips curled into a faint smile, one that was devoid of warmth. "You think I was playing you? Oh, detective, I wasn't playing you. I was keeping you alive long enough to get you here. To get you to see the truth, just before it consumes you." Thompson's stomach turned. It couldn't be true. Not her. He had trusted her. He had worked with her, shared cases, moments of vulnerability. She couldn't be the one behind it all. But as the pieces clicked together in his mind, he realized the truth had been right in front of him all along. Navarro had known about the conspiracy from the start. She had known about the players involved, about the dangerous game they were all part of, but she had never been there to stop it. She had been there to protect herself. And now, she was the one in control. The room seemed to close in on him, the walls pressing tighter with every passing second.
Why?
Why do all this? What's the point? Navarro tilted her head, her eyes gleaming with a cold, calculating light. "The point, detective, is survival. You've been looking for answers, but the truth is, there's no end. You think you can take down a system like this? A system that's been in place for decades? You think you're the first to think they can break it?
No.
This is bigger than you. Bigger than any of us. But I knew you'd get close. You were too smart to be left alone." Thompson felt the weight of her words settle over him, the full extent of the betrayal sinking in. He had been a pawn in a much larger game, one that stretched beyond anything he could have imagined. And now, with Navarro standing before him, it was clear. There was no way out. Just as he was about to speak, the sound of a door creaking open interrupted them. His head snapped toward the sound, his pulse quickening. Someone else had entered the room. A man, dressed in a suit, his face hidden in shadow. He was tall, with an air of authority that made the hairs on Thompson's neck stand up. Navarro glanced at the man, a knowing look passing between them. Thompson's stomach churned as he realized who it was. The man stepped into the light, and Thompson's heart skipped a beat. It was someone he knew, someone he had never suspected. "Detective Thompson," the man said, his voice smooth and calm. "It's time for you to stop asking questions." Everything fell into place in an instant. The case, the betrayals, the lies, it was all orchestrated by people who had been hiding in plain sight, pulling strings behind the scenes. But the final twist was too much to grasp at first. Navarro had been working for them all along. And now, with the truth laid bare, Thompson realized that he had never been in control. He had been the one being controlled all along. The game was over, but the final move had already been made. The months following the confrontation in the warehouse passed in a blur, each day merging into the next, but Thompson never quite found the peace he had hoped for. It wasn't that the case had been solved. No. The truth had been buried beneath layers of lies and corruption that even now felt impenetrable. Navarro was gone, vanished into thin air like a ghost, and the man who had been behind it all, the one Thompson had never expected to betray him, had disappeared as well, leaving only a trail of unanswered questions. The investigation that had consumed him for so long ended not with the triumphant justice he had imagined, but with the haunting silence of knowing that some mysteries were never meant to be solved. The higher-ups, the ones pulling the strings, remained hidden, their influence far-reaching and insidious. No matter how hard Thompson tried to break through the wall they had constructed, the truth always seemed to slip further away. There was no grand revelation, no moment of clarity where everything fell into place. The answers were lost, tucked away in places he couldn't access, perhaps forever. He couldn't let go, couldn't walk away from it, because somewhere deep inside, he knew that it wasn't just about this one case. It was about something far bigger, something far darker that he would never fully understand. As the days passed, the weight of the past still pressed heavily on him. He often found himself staring out his office window, lost in thought, wondering if the whole thing had been a game from the very beginning. Had he ever truly been in control, or was he always a pawn, just like everyone else caught in the web of lies and deceit? The faces of those he had trusted haunted him, and the things they had hidden from him lingered in his mind like ghosts. There were nights he couldn't sleep, nights when the shadows seemed to stretch and twist, threatening to consume him whole. But even as his heart grew heavier, Thompson found himself questioning the reality of what he had uncovered. How many times had he thought he knew the truth, only to be proven wrong? How many times had he been led down false paths, chasing after ghosts that were never real? And in the end, what did it all mean? One evening, as he sat in his office, the soft glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows across the room, Thompson received an unexpected visit. A woman familiar, but distant. She was a journalist, someone he had crossed paths with years ago, but he hadn't heard from her in months. The weight of the file in his hands felt like the weight of the world, and for the first time in months, Thompson realized that maybe, just maybe, the answers he was looking for were never meant to be found. Maybe the truth was something that no one should ever know. But as he looked up at the woman, who remained eerily calm, he understood that this wasn't the end of his journey. It was just the beginning. They weren't done with him yet. And as he watched her walk out of the room, leaving him with more questions than answers, Thompson knew one thing for sure. The story was far from over. The shadows that had haunted him for so long were only growing darker, and there would be no escaping them now. As the door clicked shut behind her, a chill ran down his spine, the weight of the final twist settling over him like a blanket of cold reality. It wasn't peace he had found. It was just another step deeper into the abyss. The mystery, the conspiracy, the secrets, they weren't finished with him yet. And in the silence that followed, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that there was still so much more to uncover, so many layers of darkness still hidden beneath the surface. The camera zoomed out slowly, the sound of distant sirens echoing in the background, leaving viewers with one lingering thought. Had the truth ever really mattered, or was it just another weapon in a game too dangerous to play? The final shot lingered on Thompson's face, his expression unreadable, as the screen faded to black, leaving the mystery unresolved, the tension hanging in the air like a storm about to break. The questions would never stop. And for those watching, the echoes of the story would continue to resonate long after the credits rolled. Thompson flipped through the file, his hands trembling as he recognized the names, the faces, the connections. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the one he had been searching for all along. But as he absorbed the information, something clicked. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. This new lead, this new revelation, hinted at something much larger, something that threatened to shake the foundations of everything he had ever believed. The conspiracy was deeper than he had imagined, and the people behind it were even more dangerous than he had thought. She sat down across from him, her expression unreadable, and without a word, slid a file across the desk. It was thick, filled with pages of handwritten notes, photos, and articles. "You've been asking the wrong questions," she said quietly, her eyes narrowing as she watched him. "There's more, detective. You've only scratched the surface."